Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I hope I'm going live about now. We have a jam packed stream today because there are two YouTube videos I want to react to, maybe just one though for time reasons. And I also want to make good on my promise to react to tomorrow's Galaxy Unpacked event by basically giving you a little bit more content up front because I'm not going to be able to stream tomorrow. So that's kind of the compromise, and it will probably take until Saturday or so until I'm actually able to stream again. I'm looking at the chat right now. We already have the master yapper Riley. Yep, audio seems to be working all right. You guys know I always have myself on through 5G on my iPad to check if the stream is okay, to check out the chat. Riley asking where are his yappers at. And Max, now member for 12 months, sending it membership milestone saying, gonna yap by myself at the gym. Finally, some purse time. I assume you mean personal time. I think there is a character limit, right? Like for those milestones, what is it, 60, 50? Okay, enjoy your personal time. This one is also for me because honestly, I still yet have to react to all the news and rumors that we're going to be covering today because I had some jam-packed days at work, including even at the weekend. So I am pretty tired. I've freshened myself up for you guys. Boy is here from Discord. We have a very lively Discord these days. People sharing news and rumors and reacting to the latest iOS betas. So if anybody is curious about that, you'll find the link to our Discord in the description of this channel. Of course, if you want to support this channel in other ways, please subscribe, like, share, comment. You guys know I love interacting with a lively comment section. Whenever you catch me live, consider leaving a super chat or super sticker. You can also become a channel member. Shout out now to Angelica, Steve, Max Maximus, and Jonathan as our MarkCheck Pro Max members here on YouTube. And shout out to Benveni, who is our first MarkCheck Pro Max supporter over on Patreon. So some nice dynamics, two new members over the last month or so. Granted, I know I don't deserve more because of my irregular streaming schedule, but I appreciate each and every one of you. Whether you support this channel directly or indirectly, it all helps tremendously for me to keep up these streams. Now, I would actually like to start with something that's not in the thumbnail or the title, even though you guys know my titles are known to be really long and take up almost the entire 100 character limit that YouTube allows. And I would like to react actually to MKBHD's Nothing Phone 3 review. I did not have a chance to watch it in full, but I did react, obviously, to the Nothing Phone 3, not necessarily the full reveal spiel, but just overall, like we saw the leaked images, we had a very good understanding of the specs even before it was officially revealed, right? So we kind of know about the Nothing Phone 3. It's very easy to guess how it performs in real life, even what its battery is going to be like, but I still wanted to react to MKBHD. And partially the reason why I want to do that is because I also want to do something else, which is I want to play a game with you guys. And I've promised you that I would incorporate more Mac gaming on this channel. Now, Mac gaming to me means any kind of good quality games I can play on the Mac. And right now, obviously, I also have Vampire Survivors, which we've played on one of my previous streams, Locked and Loaded, if you guys would prefer that. But I would prefer to start with actually The Last of Us Part 2, playing right now through remote play. You see the app down below on my M1 Max MacBook Pro connected to my PlayStation 5 Pro. A lot of Pro and Pro action. This is the Pro rendering mode in TLU Part 2. And I think looking at this, we can actually check out how it is when I react to a video inside of this. I also know that whenever I play a video in full screen, it increases the chance of it getting demonetized. So bear with me trying out a slightly new format. And of course, feel free to let me know if you like this, what I can improve about this, what I should change entirely. entirely about this. Whether you tell it to me here or in Discord, it's all very much appreciated. So, without further ado, I think I've held you up long enough. Let's actually look into MKBHD's review of the Nothing Phone 3. What's happening? No! Did the YouTube RAM throw it out? Because it's running through Safari. No, it works. Okay, so I just have to put it into picture-in-picture again. And the reason, by the way, why I'm using Safari and not Chrome or the YouTube, basically Chrome extension app, that's because it does not really well support picture-in-picture. At least for YouTube, it just tries to put everything into the corner, which is YouTube's interpretation of picture-in-picture, but that's not system-wide like what iOS and macOS usually do. And now, without further ado, let's get started. As always, let me know if you can hear everything well, how the audio and video quality is for you. Obviously, while streaming a game, it could impact the overall quality. I will try to actually give you some decent gameplay while it's happening. I turned off gore, so hopefully I'm not getting demonetized by showing you something too bloody and violent, which TLU2 is kind of known for. So yeah, let's look into this. I mean, it covers up a decent portion of the video, but I guess it's okay. So
this is the Nothing Phone 3.
And it's freaking ugly. Yeah.
You know, people say beauty is in the eye of the beholder and stuff like that. I get it. You can find beauty in anything, for sure. But also, you know, there's a nice alignment to things that feels good. And you know, when things are
so much for joining.
When things are where you expect them to be, doesn't that feel better? Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
It does.
Carcinization.
And it's not just about the
this
misalignment.
Is a strange and odd but funny phenomenon in evolutionary biology where a bunch of undersea crustaceans have all slowly evolved towards the same flat, robust, crab-like shape, because it seems to be the ideal form factor for surviving in the ocean. Oversimplified, it feels like everything down there is evolving towards a crab. And look at all these crabs. Lots of smartphones today basically look the same. So when something that comes along looks a little different, well, it's going to feel weird, isn't it? But hey, maybe someone's into the layered glass look with the text in various places. Maybe you're into the red dot turning into a functional record light. Maybe you're into a bit of a lobster. Real talk, though, it feels like every few months nothing comes out.
Let me actually comment on some of the tech here. I agree that weirdness can be like similar to beauty, of course, in the eye of the beholder, right? It's absolutely okay for tech to have some weirdness. I would argue that the stovetop triangular camera arrangement on the iPhone does have some weirdness. But it's just not enough weirdness to actually, like, you know, weird people actually out. Here you add, obviously, the misaligned camera, right, from the others. You get that glyph matrix, which also is, like, neither symmetrical nor even similarly sized to the cameras. You get, like, the indicator light somewhere for, like, recordings and whatever. But, like, I mean, why not put that on the glyph matrix, I would even argue. It's just literally, like, at this point, you're wasting space. I know it's, like, a tiny red LED, but, like, why waste energy on any of that, I would argue. Waste money. You're already making this phone way too expensive. Yeah, so the weirdness here is not just reflected in the design, but it's also in the decisions that follow from this design. Because they put effort into certain things that I don't think are really worth putting effort in, they made the phone unnecessarily more expensive, and they cut away space that could have been used differently, and they used money that could have been used somewhere else. Boy saying fighting with customer service. Oh, Jesus, what's going on there? And Riley joining the chat now officially. Hello, guys.
A new product that looks crazy and people hate on all the pictures on the internet because they look weird. And then 2 months later, we're all used to it and we forget about the looks and we can focus on the product itself.
Jesus, I'm so bad playing this without any sound.
And focus on the product. This is what Nothing is calling their first true flagship, which is what you would say if you're Nothing and you're charging $799 for a phone for the first time ever after rolling around in the budget and mid-range space for a few years. But I've been using this phone for the better part of the last week, and I'm going to disagree with the whole premise here, actually. This is no more of a flagship phone than any of Nothing's previous phones.
F-tier
now, are they
I'm
lying
actually
to us?
really good at TLOU too, guys.
Not exactly, but kinda.
For me.
Hear me out. $799 is the same price as the Samsung Galaxy S25 or the Pixel 9 or right underneath the iPhone 16. Like they are competing against bona fide flagships from mega companies with basically unlimited money.
Talking about the tech specifically for a moment again. $799 is not an extremely high price point. When you think back, and let's ignore even for a moment the iPhone 16, which starts at $799, which all it's kind of missing at that price point, I would argue, is LTPO. While it doesn't have like a periscope camera, I would argue it's very not that necessary. But when you look, for example, at the iPhone 15, now that one was actually also lacking in chip. It didn't have a 99, right? Am I having frame drops? What's OBS saying? No, probably was just like on my iPad. Let me know if there is any like issue with my stream. Maybe it's the internet, but then usually OBS would just tell me. So part of the problem here is that Apple is giving you the Apple experience, the Apple ecosystem, the compatibility with Apple accessories, the long software and security updates, a relatively high resale value, and even if you don't always get the flagship chip, pretty much every Apple device kind of performs like a flagship in terms of processor speed. That being said, of course, there are still shortcomings, and I fully agree that there should be a market that says, oh, you get this from Apple at $800, well, from us, you get an extra camera, more memory, more storage, a ProMotion or just a variable refresh rate, high refresh rate screen, right? And the Nothing phone does that. But the Nothing phone does that after already everyone else does that. Xiaomi offers phone at these prices. Vivo obviously does. Samsung even does with the base Galaxy S25. But I would also argue, if you look beyond the base Galaxy, if you just look at last year's S24 Plus, or if you look at the slightly discounted S25 Plus, you'll find a lot of the things that are good about the Nothing Phone 3, but are then further augmented because Samsung gives you even more software support. Samsung devices are better supported by game developers and app developers. There's a larger accessory market for them, right? There's plenty here. If they paid him watch the glaze, I've already known that this is not, I mean, this literally starts with him calling it ugly. So Riley, you even saw me criticizing Marquez for certain stuff in the Discord. Not that he's in our Discord, but sharing some of his Twitter stuff. I am plenty critical of MKBHD when it needs to be. This is
not having a high refresh rate display. So
trash.
This Nothing Phone 3, it's certainly dressed up like a flagship, and it is the most flagship yet of any Nothing phone. It is huge. It's got this super bright, high refresh rate OLED display. It has a massive new silicon carbon battery, new triple 50 megapixel cameras, IP68 certification, up to 16 gigs of RAM. Like, it's got all the makings of what could be a flagship. But when you peel back the mask just a little bit, like right under the surface, it's the same exact strategy that Nothing has been running on all their previous phones in the past. The playbook is to just cut back just a little bit from the highest end stuff in ways that hopefully you, the buyer, don't notice. And it still feels like a flagship, but that allows them to cut costs and undercut the competition a little bit. So it works. It's not a bad strategy. It's allowed them to make great phones in the past. But it's just harder to sell that strategy at this price. So for starters, the chip inside, right? It's not the expensive, proven, powerful flagship Snapdragon 8 Elite chip. This is running the Snapdragon 8S Gen 4 instead. It's one of the first phones we've seen using this chip. And to be fair, it is much better than anything we've seen in any previous Nothing phone. It's a 4nm chip. it's something like 40% better CPU and like 90% better GPU than the chip in the 2-year-old.
So because this is a very chip-centric channel, Riley, I know you like a lot of chip talk. We are going to actually get to some Apple-related chip talk later on. What I find fascinating here is the 8S Gen 4 is not a bad chip. It's basically in some way like an last gen flagship, right? Like the issue with that is, or maybe it's like a mix of between like the 8 Gen 3 and the 8 Gen 4, right? It's definitely not as powerful as the 8 Elite, which is totally fine by itself. Again, at $800, Apple has not always offered you flagship performance. And it does give you things that a base iPhone 16 most definitely does not. High refresh, large battery, large screen too, right? 3 cameras. There's plenty here that's on offer. So I will not actually shit on this phone specifically for value. I'll just shit on it for being confused. I think that if you really want to prioritize design, then do it actually in a way that makes your design an attractive point. I would argue that already the Nothing Phone 2 actually kind of sacrificed some of the goodness of the Nothing Phone 1 design. I felt like they were just adding random lines to the back and stuff like that to make it seem different than it actually, more different than it actually was versus contemporary mid-rangers. And now they're advertising this as a flagship, but they don't even match those flagships in the way that previous Nothing phones match the mid-rangers. And the design, I would argue, is actually way worse in that regard, where it is a notable downgrade versus previous generations. And even versus like modern flagships, a lot of people will like claim, oh, the iPhone is getting boring or whatever. But there's an iPhone 17 Pro redesign right around the corner. Even just 1.5 years ago, Apple switched to very high-end like materials like titanium. Samsung followed suit with the S24 Ultra and S25 Ultra. Xiaomi, Vivo, Oppo, all of those companies, while sure their designs are somewhat predictable, and there's at least like differentiable from an iPhone or a Galaxy, right? So if that was your main argument, like the Nothing Phone stands out versus everything else just in design, but now you're doing so in a negative way, which is, why would you do that to yourself is my question.
Phone 2. The phone is zippy and smooth as hell basically all the time.
Similar to OnePlus, I don't have a problem with Nothing Phone optimization. Obviously, there's a similar ethos here, similar philosophy to just writing and optimizing the code. Pretty lightweight, pretty good efficiency, pretty good performance for a non-flagship processor. RAM utilization is okay, but then again, Nothing Phone is also pretty generous with the amount of memory that you get. This starts at 12 gigabytes and 256 and goes up to 512 and 16 gigabytes. 16 gigabytes for a device like this is a tiny bit overkill in my opinion, but then again, you only pay $100 to double your storage and to increase your memory by 33%, which just from a hardware perspective is good value, especially considering that it's also good storage with UFS 4.0.
Software experience in a second, but is it the best available?
Man, without sound,
well,
you really
technically no. The Snapdragon 8 Elite still smokes this. You can see benchmark scores. It's pretty
really
clear that's
not
still
Vampire Survivors where you have
now you as a user
might
need. Never notice that. In fact, you probably wouldn't if you just use the phone side by side in a lot of random normal activities. But if you happen to get into graphically intensive gaming or the most intense tasks, that's what separates a flagship from an upper mid-range chip. So for some context, some other phones using this chip, the Poco F7 and the iQOO Neo 10. Both of these are sub $500 phones. Okay. I also think they were very clever pairing it up with 12 gigs.
For this comparison, these devices also have other cuts that make them very much mid-range. They're also, in terms of the market they're targeting, they're not Western market oriented. They I absolutely cannot afford to ask anything more than what's roughly translatable to around $500 or 500 euros. So I would argue if we were going really by the standards of those devices, you could argue that the Nothing Phone 3 is more Western market oriented, which, like it or not, does increase the sale price because the Western market is in general just not more rich, but more affluent in that regard. And it's design focused, which again, if the design was good, would argue for some extra value. So if those devices are 500, I would argue with all those benefits, this device is anywhere around the 600 to best case $700 product. I would argue it's probably right in the middle, like a 650 MSRP with maybe a pretty frequent drops to 600 on discount, making it basically a more high-end version of something like OnePlus offers with the Nord series, but with more premiumness for primarily for the aesthetic. That's kind of how I see this device. And unfortunately, that's not how Nothing saw this device. No, are you telling me? Oh my, what's wrong with the picture-in-picture mode here? Jesus Christ. No, you cannot do that to me. Oh, God. Enter picture-in-picture. At least it's fast. By the way, guys, I have macOS Tahoe 26 Beta 3 installed, just as I have iOS 26 Beta 3 installed, just as I have iPadOS 26 Beta 3 installed, and just as I have watchOS Beta 3 installed. No tvOS Beta yet. They are shockingly smooth. So while there might be bugs, and this could be one of them, I would argue, there is a decent chance that this is also just YouTube having some problem. It's definitely not a RAM issue because all I'm doing is having a few Safari tabs open. I have nothing. I have Vampire Survivors in the background, but it's not really running, so it's probably not using more than 3 gigs of RAM at most or something like that. And obviously this is remote play, so this actually has a significantly less RAM overhead than an actual game. And obviously we are on a 32 gigabyte RAM Mac. Also, what I've noted in previous betas, that my Mac was getting ridiculously hot during charging. That seems to be fixed. By the way, guys, we have a decent amount of you joining. Please like the video if you're enjoying this. Boy is rejoining, saying he's now done with fighting customer service in America. You can cuss at them. I still probably wouldn't, but maybe a general cuss, like an F, not the F slur, but like just F. Like if you just say it to yourself, but yeah. FT is broken? What is FT?
Some context, some other phones using this chip, the Poco F7 and the iQOO Neo 10. Both of these are sub $500 phones. I also think they were very clever pairing it up with 12 gigs of RAM and 256 gigs of storage base. It's fast RAM, it's UFS 4.0. And then the upgraded version for $899 is 16 gigs of RAM and half a terabyte. Awesome to see that. But there is no 8128 version. Wait, and I think if they did make one, that would probably be like $699. But they didn't. Now, when we get to the outside of this phone, there is this, again, huge new AMOLED display. Surely it's a flagship display, right? It's gigantic. 6.67 inches corner to corner with perfectly even bezels all the way around. That takes extra work. It's a gorgeous AMOLED, nice color reproduction. And it's a good amount over 1080p. It's nice and sharp, smooth with that dynamic refresh rate up to 120 hertz.
Oh, Walmart.
And it gets crazy bright, 1600 nits outdoors, but then 4500 nits peak brightness with HDR. So the numbers on paper go crazy, and it's such a nice screen to look at. I've loved using it.
Not sure
though. What's the catch?
I mean, I am kind of customer service and tech support
you would
for all
literally
my
never know this unless you check the spec sheet, but the glass protecting the front of this display, it's Gorilla Glass 7i, and that is a mid-range glass in their lineup where you might see flagships using the more durable Gorilla Glass Victus or Victus 2. And normally I wouldn't even bring that up, but that's definitely something to consider on a phone that is meant to...
I will say that those are kind of spec points that I don't think most people do care that much about. You can argue whether or not you should, given a certain price point, when a certain price point is reached. That being said, yes, it's a worse screen, but if everything else about the product was still nicely balanced, I could see accepting that downside, right? Plus, you could also make that argument. Well, people put cases on their phones. I believe this device actually ships with a case for the back, so that's kind of a point in their favor. And on the front, a lot of people even put like protective glass there. So again, you don't have to agree that those are arguments that like, oh, buy this $800 phone to then buy like a $30 screen protector, or in my case I buy 2 screen protectors for $18 for my iPhones. But yeah, that to me wouldn't necessarily break it. Boy saying, I'm about to cook, so I'm about to hop off here. What are you doing? I've been watching my TV while fighting with customer service. I'm going to be obviously reacting to all the stuff that has been dropping recently with the iPhone 17 rumors. That includes the 17e. We have new rumors on that. We have the 17 Air stuff, some regarding bezels. We have a little bit of chip stuff launched right when I started the stream, actually. We have more stuff about the design for the iPhone 17 Pro series. And we have even more than that. Well, with the 17 Pro, we also obviously don't just have a comment on the overall design, but we also have the fact that it's going to be made out of a different material for the chassis. They need to have a screen protector for the back glass. Well, or some people call this a case, boy. Benveni joining saying, Mark is the ultimate brain rot YouTube. By the way, guys, I apologize for having this on my ear. I cut myself while shaving after work, so if I bleed, then you know I'm alive. Or something stupid like that, I guess. Yeah, so don't be too shocked if you see some blood on this stream. Jesus Christ, should have kept this on. It refuses to fucking heal up for some reason. That's like drama that you didn't expect to see here, right? Right, but if I turn around here, yeah, you probably don't see it, thankfully. Have you seen my case? I do have a case. Yeah, boy, I saw what happened with your phone on Discord. So, yeah, guys, but let us get back to the brain rot. I mean, the tech coverage, of course, the hard-hitting journalistic tech coverage. And yeah, guys, just comment. You see, I love interacting with you.
A lot of its time face down. And then another thing, there are a lot of like really nice subtle things that go into this screen. Like it has a 1000 hertz touch sample rate, so it's even more responsive than the phone too. It also has 2160 hertz PWM dimming. And it also has a very acceptable optical fingerprint reader down near the bottom.
What's hilarious about this is before I started the stream, I actually deliberately turned off too much gore in the game, right? So too much blood and violence and brains splattered around the screen. And now the one bleeding is me freaking IRL. I'm not going to show you my ear, but you're probably going to see me occasionally cover it up but I'm going to DiCaprio this. I'm going to keep bleeding right while I'm performing. So feel free to draw a super chat or something like that to reward my almost stupid level of dedication here. Let's continue with the actual video.
LTPS display instead of the most premium LTPO. And all that really means in practice is instead of varying the refresh rate from 1 to 120 hertz, it can go from 30 to 120 hertz. You would never notice, but it does mean a little bit worse power efficiency. I'll tell you what though, it can actually absolutely handle the slightly worse power efficiency.
There's also a point with LTPS that it doesn't support variable refresh rate in the same way as LTPO. So I mean, that does go back to efficiency because that could allow you to play something at lower refresh rates, which obviously helps then with battery life. That being said, it obviously also helps with smoothness, for example, in a game if you don't reach your exact refresh rate. However, given the chip that's inside, I would probably man, just capping a game at 60 FPS or 30 FPS, just to preserve, to actually get what you can get out of the chip. I would argue if you unlock it, then you're wasting power. You're probably not getting the highest quality graphics that you could get if you're trying to make this run a game at a 80 or 90, 100, 120 FPS. So just go to a nice log 30 or 60 and you're gonna be fine. Guys, let me very quickly check how I look. Okay, you cannot see just how much I'm freaking bleeding on my left ear. Thank freaking God. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to save the lock or to find the safe lock here.
The battery in this phone is elite. It's marketed as a 5150 milliamp hour battery, but according to Nothing, and it gets complicated, but it's actually rated at a 5500 milliamp hour battery. It's silicon carbon. It charges extra fast at 65 watts. It supports wireless charging, reverse wired charging. It's great. It sips power in standby, and it's genuinely a 2-day phone if you want it to be, even without the more efficient Snapdragon 8 Elite. So honestly, flagship battery for sure. So then, okay, what about the cameras?
Again, small criticism here. Flagship battery versus what? Like versus the Galaxy S25 Ultra, which has a 5000 milliamp hour battery. Sure. Is it really flagship versus like the Vivo X200, which has like a 6000 milliamp hour battery? I would wager probably not, right? I mean, the OnePlus Nord is coming out with like a 6900 milliamp hour battery in other regions, and then in the Western market, I believe because of regulations and stuff like that, it's capped to like 5200. So it seems like 5200, unless some regulations in the United States, maybe Europe. I'm actually not sure about the regulation situation in Europe. We might see this capacity quite a lot, where we might see like devices for India and China giving you like close to 7000 milliamp hours, and here in the West we will be limited to something like 5000, 5200. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, Benvenu, rejoin whenever you can, man. It's all okay.
So cameras feels pretty flagship. And you know what? Again, it is closer to a flagship than any previous.
The cameras here, I would argue, are the least, well, beyond the LTPS and the glass. So, I mean, I guess there's plenty of non-flagship stuff here. But I would argue that the cameras themselves are not flagshipy at all. Now, you could make those cameras work in a flagship like an iPhone or a Pixel because those brands have much better algorithms for computational photography. If your Nothing phone, you cannot really make those sensors and optical systems work as flagships. It's just too cheap. Like actual flagships that would be competing for the market that this is targeting, they would cost a little more. Sure, they would be more like $900 to $1,000, but then they would have larger sensors across every camera, more advanced optical systems, and even in that regard, I would also argue that companies like Vivo and Xiaomi at this point also have, probably because of their significantly higher operating budgets, that they also have better computational photography than Nothing phones. So if there is, like, I guess OnePlus also, but then even OnePlus is connected to Oppo, so their algorithms shouldn't be total crap. But I would argue that Nothing phone is one of the companies who can afford the least to really skimp out on good camera hardware, especially if they still target like a flagship level
Nothing phone
branding.
Has ever been. But I've used this now for a little bit. It's still a notch behind the S25s and Pixel 9s and iPhone 16s of the world, the mainstream flagships that I'm comparing this to.
Seems like
this main sensor is the biggest they've ever used, 1 over 1.3 inches. It lets a ton more light in.
Jesus Christ.
And I'm shooting with this, and I realized as I'm looking through all the pictures I've taken, for some reason, it's frequently soft. Like even on a perfectly normal shot, the colors will be fine, the exposure will be fine, but the subject of the photo, when I zoom in, it should be in sharp focus, but it's just a little bit off. I think you can blame this a little bit on autofocus, maybe a little bit on tuning for a long.
I was about to say the last thing, which is, and I don't mean tuning just in the software aspect, but like people always forget that making sensors that are as large as 1 by 1.13, or especially like a full 1-inch sensor, making those sensors work inside a smartphone camera with the optics to have like edge-to-edge sharpness, to have good autofocus with the focus pixels and stuff like that. That is also a decent effort in terms of hardware. It's not as simple, and even if you have decent hardware, it's not just computational photography that then comes into mind. It's just also writing a good driver for this camera. Having a good performing camera app. I mean, there is a reason why something like what is it, Project Indigo or something like that, this app like launched on iPhone recently from, I believe it's the Adobe guys, and basically the idea is to still have computational photography, but target a much more natural end product with them than what the regular iPhone camera does, for example. This is going to be a difficult development for Nothing Phone. I'm not sure if they will able to make it, in my opinion. Bro isn't paid like iJustine. Well, iJustine is also just very happy-go-lucky as a person in that regard. Not to say that Marquez cannot be swept up in like the glitz and glamour of like a reveal event and the press early access, but this is a device that Marquez is also pretty easy to manipulate, or at least guide, in his opinion, I would argue, where if he sees that tech Twitter, it really doesn't like something, he is much more likely to either be honest in also showing that he doesn't like it, or pretending that he doesn't like it. I think for most of this stuff, quite honestly, with how much tech has always gone through Marquez's hands, I honestly don't think he cares about stuff like this anymore, right? Like for all the talk about how different Nothing Phone is and the different perspective they might be bringing to the industry, honestly, I do not believe it when people are like, oh my God, it's such a big deal that we have a company like this. Nah, I don't think that anybody's truly that excited about Nothing Tech. So it's easier now to shit on them now that they are new, now that they are a little bit bigger, so you don't have to touch them with like gloves. So, but overall, yeah, Marquez is still overall mostly honest. I do have my issues with him, but it's not explicitly that he is lying that was ever my problem with him.
Sensor with shallower depth of field. It's definitely capable of good pictures, and it's a little bit wider than you might expect. But yeah, that's a little bit odd. Then the telephoto is 3x, also a tiny bit soft sometimes, but also very useful. It's where your macro shots come from, and you can get some really sick, impressive close-ups. And the ultra wide and the selfie cameras, they are the most consistent and most flagship of them all. But yeah,
wait,
like I
what?
said, the whole camera setup is just
yeah, I guess you could say that because the ultra wide is crap on every camera, including flagships. So I guess you could make an argument in that direction.
Behind those things. And you may only notice if you're zooming in and pixel peeping. But again, that's the point. Mostly good enough for most people most of the time. I think with a little tuning, this can be an A- camera. I think a perfect encapsulation of the priorities of this phone are, I mean, look at this design. It's an insane design, but technically no camera bump. I mean, the rings obviously protrude a little bit, but most flagship phones at this point also have some sort of big camera bump.
Should be noted, this device is 9mm thick, so it's notably thicker than an iPhone or a Galaxy at this point, and it's going to be even notably thicker versus like next-gen Galaxy Ultra, which is going to be thinner than before. So yeah, this is the problem when you're just evaluating something on like the presence of a camera bump or not, because clearly this device is also not very not very flagship form factor, which is, yeah, it has like a decent battery inside it. I'm not even sure if it has like a flagship level cooling system, like a vapor chamber, but like for 9 millimeters, I would expect this to have like a 6,000 milliampere hours. And with that kind of spec, with an 8S Gen 4 combined, this could actually outperform most flagships, at least in the West, when it comes to battery life. And that is what I think should have been one of the selling points. OnePlus kind of does that. OnePlus doesn't necessarily have the software, unfortunately, to really make get the most out of their battery, right? Like right now, they underperform an iPhone with roughly like 1,500 milliampere hours more. So you can see that obviously chip efficiency, software optimization, even optimization through developers that know how to target iPhone hardware is a big deal in achieving good efficiency. This device just feels like a no man's land, right? It's not as cheap as a Chinese device that's clearly not meant to attack iPhones or Galaxies, right? It's not as high end as including Chinese flagships that target 1-inch cameras and ridiculously large batteries and vapor chambers. Though one would argue that, for example, what Xiaomi does with their vapor chambers, it's not really working out, in my opinion, right? You could probably replicate a lot what they do with vapor chambers with very traditional cooling. Yeah, this is just really in the middle. And if this was, again, 650 to at most 700 MSRP, which means you could probably get it to 600 to 650 with a discount, I think a lot more people would care a lot less about its shortcomings. No, I hit the shoulder. Now I need to waste more ammo. Jesus, I absolutely cannot shoot with the latency. The Last of Us Part 2 actually is getting an update right now. I actually didn't know this game was still getting updates. Well, kudos to Sony, I guess, in that regard. Yeah, let us actually pause the brain rot for a bit, and I will focus for the rest of the video fully on this. So let's see what Marquez has to offer here.
They all sit on. It turns out to get this whole big telephoto camera to not have a bump, they actually engineered part of the PCB or the board inside to have a hole in it so the optics could actually split, like punch through the PCB instead of being stacked totally on top of it. I'm sure we'll see this in like a JRig everything teardown video at some point. But yeah, basically mission accomplished. No camera bump. But that also...
Yeah, but is it worth it, right? Especially like, I believe this is actually the telephoto camera, right? So, and funny enough, it's the camera with the least amount of bump. So my question is, if you have this motherboard design where you could make all your cameras somewhat like that, why didn't you at least go consistent in that regard, right? Now it looks like every camera is a different kind of bump, which, I mean, that's kind of like the irregularity that they're targeting with this design. But my God, is that not a good idea, at least in my opinion.
They had to use some smaller parts to make it work, and this is actually a physically smaller telephoto than the cheaper Nothing Phone 3A Pro. So spoiler, the design is still the priority of this phone. Always has been. But let's talk about the most controversial bit of this design, which is the glyphs, which made Nothing phones famous for a couple years. This year, the glyph lights are gone. And replacing them is this small display on the back upper corner of the phone. It's 489 LED pixels. They're calling it Glyph Matrix. On its face, this has some useful...
Yeah, but like the problem is, again, we have actually seen smartphones with full functional screens on the back that can serve as like a camera preview, that can serve as like a less distracting way to quickly see at a glance a notification or something like that, even when your phone is turned upside down. Something that will consume less energy than your full screen. Something that could even, to a small degree, act like a very white flash, right? again, limited functionality. Most phones don't do this. This functionality has now been kind of relegated to foldables, which obviously do need an extra screen on the back. That being said, of course, it's way better to have an actual screen on the back than this. And some might say, well, isn't this better than, and see what I did there, nothing? And I would argue no, because now you're wasting space for something that's not nearly good enough to justify the cost, the effort, and even just the branding and marketing confusion, right? Because every feature also needs to be marketed to a degree. This is a problem, for example, that historically Apple has faced too. Think about the, for example, the 3D touch functionality that was introduced in like the iPhone 6s series, right? And lasted up until like the iPhone 11. Like, the feature was actually great, and everyone who loved it, who used it, I would argue, learned to like it. The problem is that feature was relatively difficult to explain to most people, right? They've really felt like, oh, hard press is basically the same as a long press. Why can that be the same? That's kind of what Apple later did with haptic touch. But yeah, they removed it. They could then increase battery capacity because of that, because that feature added some thickness to the glass. And this is in a similar vein, which is, I would argue, 3D Touch is way, way better than this, right? But it's hard to market. It takes up extra space. It takes up extra cost to manufacture. And it exists in this wildly confused arrangement of cameras with different bump thickness, different geometrical shapes on the back, and an indicator for why is... You know what? Just quit. An indicator for like recording, even though technically you could put that functionality up there. Now to go through functionality here, you need like a force touch like integrated button. God help you if you don't actually know what this is for. Also, like, if you're gonna make this an like a button, right? Okay, that one by itself stands out, but then when you look down below, now you have like a similar circle, and this could also be kind of a button. You're just confusing people with all that randomness. So even in what is done here, it still makes no sense.
About it, but then it's also surrounded by gimmicks. Okay, so the basic idea is like your phone is face down, and then the lights on the back would light up, and you could tell something about what that notification is to decide if you want to actually pick it up and check or not. So if that is all you're after, then okay, success. More pixels means more information. The new Essential Notifications Builder is super powerful and informative. It's better than ever before. I can set up a certain icon to come up in the dots whenever I get a certain type of notification or anything from a certain person or from a certain app. Let's say I want to be able to leave my phone face down, but I never want to miss any notifications from mom.
Okay, so that by itself, right? You already feel the niche to gimmick nature of this. And I am somebody who's always said gimmicks by themselves aren't bad, but it's the difference when a gimmick just comes as an extra on top of everything that you already have, and when a gimmick actually starts to kind of take over the identity of what you're pushing. Like a good example, for example, is the Wii, right? The Wii, sure, you could argue motion controls in the grand scheme of gaming are a gimmick, right? But they are a fun gimmick. It's worth having them. It's worth iterating on them. The issue with the Wii as it came out, like no real controller in the box, pretty underpowered, is over time it pretty much only had those gesture controls as an actual selling point versus the PS3, the Xbox 360. I guess pricing was kind of also its point, but again, at that point you probably are better off just sticking to an original Xbox or a PS2. But yeah, and here the identity of the devices have been like connected to this glyph lights thing. Now it's transitioning to this glyph matrix, and none of that feels like it's getting improved. Yeah, Riley saying, I lay down my phone so I don't see notification. And also, don't forget which era we are in, right? this is the era of smartwatches. This is the era of having wireless earbuds, right? At what point do you have so much auxiliary help to manage your notifications that putting extra hardware on your device to do that just seems wasteful?
Ever. Okay, set that up. No matter what she sends, no matter how she sends it, I will get an icon or a picture from my gallery or something that I can turn into dots, and done. Anytime mom calls or texts or whatever, I can't see what they said, but I can see that she sent me something. So
wait, is that a picture of him? But in the LED glyph method?
Outside of that, it immediately starts feeling way more gimmicky. Like, okay, take another look at the back of this phone. You see this little dot here hidden in this design? This little...
No, I don't, because I see multiple other dots or squares that are also hidden in this design.
Is actually a pressure-sensitive area. And when you press that, the back display lights up, and then you can use a single press to cycle through these glyph toys, and then a long press.
The fact that they call them toys is very telling, unfortunately. Like, just how limited and gimmicky they actually are.
To actually engage with them. So you can cycle to a timer and then start a timer.
Riley, as you can tell, I also don't always wear my watch at home. That being said, like, if you are in the situations where you really need to know, like, one specific person is contacting you, but you won't react to anything else, right? That to me is like a work situation, or a situation where you kind of already expect to do still some kind of notification management. So in that scenario, you will either keep your phone with the display up, or you will use something else to help you understand that a notification is coming in, like a smartwatch.
The back of your phone, which doesn't sync up with the actual clock app. So if you turn your phone screen on, the timer disappears, so be careful. You can also use the back display as a viewfinder for your main camera, kinda. Or you can place...
Okay, good, thank you, because he's actually criticizing that. Mr. Rooster Boss really didn't... Like, he said that was one of the more useful things in there.
Maybe you're into that. Maybe you and your friends don't have a bottle handy, but you have...
And maybe you cannot, for some reason, like, spin the actual phone, or find, like, a website that has, like, a spinning bottle. Like, I mean, there has to be, right? Like, spinning bottle, right? There has to be, like, a website for that. It might be something old that's flash, spin the bottle, okay. I mean, you can, like, throw a coin, right, on the spin the bottle, the party game, spin the bottle online. Okay, it's an app. I have everyone except work and parents muted if it's not urgent. Yeah, well, but that's kind of the kiss me, spin the bottle. Can I spin the bottle right here, please? I just have to log in. Jesus, what's up? This is the one thing that I missed from the previous Flash era, like Flash Player era. As long as your browser could play something, spin the wheel, random picker. Okay, so you could edit the wheel, and I guess that kind of works. Okay, yeah, so I guess that's kind of like a spinning the bottle, right? I mean, you on a smartphone, this would obviously work, because you could position your smartphone in a way where it would then look at somebody. Yeah, so you don't need this.
Phone. Or you can play rock, paper, scissors against your own phone.
Which I'm also pretty sure exists online in some
I think you get the idea. They're fun tech demos, but the utility runs out real quick. Now, they have opened up the API. So developers, if they want
Which didn't really help the original glyph lights much, but okay.
Make more stuff for the back screen. You know, with this phone, I don't really know how many actually will. Like, is Spotify going to make, like, album art, cover art on the back of the phone here? I don't know. But the Nothing community has already started developing some stuff and messing with it. They've made this one. This is a magic 8-ball. So instead of turning your phone over...
Oh, yeah, more randomness.
Google
so basically, this has become a random number generator, right?
Magic 8-ball, you can ask the back of your phone, and it'll give you a little message. Cool. Look, the real
it won't work. He put that on purpose here.
Part of a Nothing phone is still the software on the front of the phone, because Nothing OS 3.5, soon to be updated to 4.0, it's just great. Like, they have this tastefully modified version of Android with this nice aesthetic, finely
Okay, I
tuned, smooth
stopped
performance,
bleeding.
and
Yay.
a handful of useful features that they just sort of sprinkle in there so you can sort of choose which ones you want to use or easily ignore. The AI-powered Essential space continues to evolve and get more features, though it doesn't sync with anything externally, so I don't use it. And yes, there's still a couple.
But like, this is my problem though. If you aren't using it, you aren't really evaluating it either. So just because it's evolving doesn't actually mean it's really useful. Like technically Samsung's AI like daily feed or whatever is also evolving, but it's still far from what you would actually want to use.
Button for it on the side of the phone, but it's not too in your face. You can ignore it if you don't want to use it. And the little things like being able to resize the quick settings toggles or the way you
why? Can you not do that on Android?
swipe up on the camera app to flip through presets. It's just so clean. Everything is it's clean, it's smooth.
I like this. This is really good. I like the font. I like the UI. This reminds me of like the camera filters that Apple had like with iOS 7.
Animated, and the whole OS is responsive in ways that feel higher end than.
Okay. I mean, I guess it's lenticular. What is it showing on the other side? Lenticular is not supposed to be completely blurred. Like lenticular is supposed to show you two things, but depending on the angle, it will show you one or the other.
Specs would ever suggest. I think the best new feature on this phone is the universal search box. So you might actually kind of get confused because there's a permanent Google search box.
Which Google, I believe, has said they might let you remove in the future because it's really starting to annoy people.
Bottom of the home screen at all times. Not that search box, but when you pull up the app drawer, that search box. Now, that one searches through your stuff on your phone like usual, or you can ask it a question and hit that AI button, and it'll use a modified version of Gemini to go online and pull up a short and sweet answer for you.
By the way, I have been using like ChatGPT more recently. I've been challenging myself to really get a good experience with it. I have to say, using it as an actual like search engine replacement is awful. Like trying to ask it anything recent, like for example, the Superman movie is coming out, right? It's directed by James Gunn. And I was like asking it, when is the review embargo dropping for it? Which is today. It was like today at 2 p.m. or something like that. And I asked it like 2 days ago, but because ChatGPT is trained on data that's often 6 months to a year old, right? It obviously didn't know that because that's information didn't exist out there 6 to 12 months ago. So my problem here is the problem is I almost would prefer like a first attempt at doing like a regular Google search and only then doing like an AI thing. And that's kind of what Google search with Gemini integrated is doing. Now it will try to shove a Gemini result right on top, whether you like it or not, but then underneath it, you'll still get your traditional Google search results. Some of it might even be like summarized from an article, so kind of AI-ish, but and potentially more useful than actual generative AI. So while I do believe that ChatGPT, potentially Copilot and everything like that, I think they will hurt Google in the long run somewhat. I'm actually convinced that Google will still come out on top because they do have the stuff to make AI actually relevant. I mean, think about even what we see right now, Google Drive. Having your data that might be syncing from Android, and with it also stuff that you might already have in your Gmail account, right? Having all of that subject to AI analysis through Gemini is a huge advantage over anything that ChatGPT could offer. Google search itself, but also searching in Google's other services like YouTube, YouTube Music, the Play Store, right? It just also being informed about Google products in that way, apps on the Play Store, music on YouTube Music, movies, TV shows through YouTube TV, videos that are on YouTube in general. I think people are underestimating the advantages, the structural advantages that Gemini will have over ChatGPT, Copilot, Siri down the road. Hello?
Tuned to kind of just be brief and give you answers to stuff. It's nice. And again, you can choose to use it or just never even try. You can just leave it tucked away, and you can use it the way you normally do and just search for your apps on your phone. And this is also going to get updates. They're promising 5 years of major software updates. I could do the nitpick.
Yeah, so you can see this is a thicker bump slightly than this, and this is much thinner than this, while the glyph matrix is just fully flat. And then this is actually underneath it because it's under the transparent glass underneath. And then some stuff is even further down. So there are like multiple layers here, which all kind of don't vibe too well visually.
You can be like, Samsung's doing 7 years and Apple does even more. So it's not quite a flagship, but you've seen how flagships kind of vary all over the board. So
I've seen Sony offer like 3 years. So at least it's better than that.
The credit for the software. So at the end of the day, is the title of this review a little dramatic?
What's
maybe?
Actually
Sure.
The title? They lied.
But flagship, the word flagship is being used.
Yeah, I think that's actually what caught my attention originally, because usually I would expect such a review from Marquez to be very middle of the road, to say, oh, it's not the prettiest phone, but hey, the hardware isn't terrible for the price necessary. Yeah, I think it's a good review. He still covered the phone, but he also had a larger, almost like philosophical discussion about what this phone is trying to do and how in many ways it's not succeeding.
Heavily as a marketing term. And so maybe the review title should just been Nothing Phone 3. They did marketing. Whatever. But the point is, it's still
or I would argue they over-marketed, or I would argue marketing over substance. I think that would be a good thing, right? It's the weird design, it's the glyph matrix, and underneath it, it's still a decent substance, but that substance should be front and center.
They're charging $799 for this phone. And there are other really good phones that you can get for that much money. So this phone, just like previous...
You could probably get an S24 Ultra at this price, at this point. Like around Christmas season, my brother-in-law got the S24 Ultra for around $1,000, actually a little bit less. So when I consider how like the price devaluation, of course, works, that was before the S25 Ultra was official, and now like almost half a year has passed since then. You're very likely to get like a brand new, like, and I don't mean non-used S24U for around this price. I mean, even if it's more like $850, that's still better than this. And it's the Snapdragon 8 Gen 4, which is very comparable to this chip, actually better in some ways. 12 gigs of RAM, 256 gigabytes of storage, same basic configuration. You get 4 cameras rather than 3. You get an LTPO screen. You already get the great anti-reflective coating. You get the S Pen, which is actually better than the S Pen inside the S25 Ultra. You get a more premium titanium body, more protective Gorilla Glass Victus. You get a similarly sized battery with better software optimization. Maybe you'll end up with slightly less real-world battery life, but right, it's not that noticeable. And and you'll lose out on the glyph matrix. Big whoop.
Phones is the one that you would get if you really care not so much about raw specs, but about good software and a unique design. You don't want another crab. You want lobster.
This isn't lobster. Lobsters are prettier than crabs. Guys, we've been streaming for about an hour. I want to remind you again to do all the YouTube jazz. I did warm you up. Basically, I'm trying to make my streams a bit longer with the kind of gameplay we can be doing here and everything else. Of course, my regular news and rumor and leak coverage will continue, and whenever I am actually reading out an article, I will be looking at the screen. I don't have a separate pair of eyes to play simultaneously, and I'm not even using a monitor, which for some of you was actually novel to find out. I have my laptop literally right in front of me, which is actually really helpful because not only is better display helping me put it into 16:9 mode, it's also actually managing the brightness. So sometimes in bright summer conditions, because I'm in the living room, like plus I have my lights on top, I will put this into over 1,000 nits of screen brightness. What is our current brightness level? Is it actually maxed out? It's 1600, but I don't think 1600 is actually 1600 full screen. But yeah, you see, I'm using it at a really, really high brightness level. Yeah, this is about okay, 12, 1300. But let's actually start with the big news that has happened yesterday. Apple released iOS 26 Beta 3. Of course, with it, they also released macOS Tahoe 26 Beta 3. They released watchOS 26 Beta 3. So all the regular candidates, no HomePod Beta and no tvOS Beta thus far, but visionOS betas, all that stuff. And what's interesting is that the main controversy about this release is the tuning of the transparency. And I know I shill for it quite often on this channel, but I actually highly recommend, if you watch this and you're really interested in this community and some of the more nuanced coverage we are providing here, is we, including me, plenty of people here are sharing their experiences with the latest betas and everything like that. So go to our Discord, but of course, 95Mac, Mac Rumors, Apple Insider, Cult of Mac, all those websites will of course provide you coverage. What's interesting is that I really non-stop see this screenshot, and it's basically showing that Apple has dramatically tuned down liquid glass visuals to now it being almost frosted glass. And I have to say, as somebody who tried this is not how it looks for me. My theory right now is that the current implementation is designed, for one, it actually can switch from bright to dark, irrespective of whether your phone is set to light or dark mode. So it will adapt for better readability, similar to how text can switch from like white to black, depending on what's like on top of it or what's underneath it with all the transparency levels. But also what's interesting here to me is that I would argue this does almost look like frosted glass, but you also need to see this in action. Whenever you actually scroll, you will see that it still has very liquidy animation. So it actually distorts the image underneath. It doesn't just add a level of blur on top of it. It doesn't just like make the colors less vibrant. I would argue the real end result is probably somewhere in the middle between what this shows. And I know this doesn't make sense because some people will say, well, that this is an actual screenshot. But again, if you go to our Discord, you will see plenty of showings where this is looks way more liquid glassy than this specific screenshot. Maybe this specific screenshot was just right over super bright whites and basically said, oh, instead of being basically totally crap, let us actually just treat it more like frosted glass for a moment before this adjusts. Right. To me, the other point, of course, is if you're using dark mode, you will find it way more liquid glassy than this as well. So I know some people are unhappy about this. Some people are claiming Apple is backtracking based on like tech Twitter opinions and shit like that. I honestly don't think what's happening, that this is what's happening. I think that Apple is experimenting with the design itself, with corrections for it. Contrary to what people were saying when iOS 26 initially launched and saying, oh, Apple forgot about accessibility, Apple forgot about readability, right? Apple still very much cares about those things, and they care about those things in default iOS. I've seen some people ask, why doesn't Apple give us a slider to increase or reduce the liquid glass effect? And the reason is the same reason why they didn't give you a slider for basically the transparency levels on iOS 7. It's because Apple tries to target a curated experience level that's very identifiable, that's very distinct, and that's something that also developers can try to optimize for. If somebody goes super crazy with their transparency effect and suddenly that ends up breaking the visuals on certain apps, and then that person goes to complain, yeah, guess what? That's not something that Apple wants to see. Apple would rather catch some crap personally from not getting it exactly right, but then over time improving it, than leaving it up to you. And I know that some of you don't like that approach. I personally prefer it versus the full openness that some Android skins target. But yeah, expect basically beta 4, the public beta, everything to come to keep refining this effect, to refine it on a system level, on a per app level, on a per UI element level, and of course also adopt it differently to the light mode versus dark mode. So there's plenty of stuff that will be changing. Apple will be changing with you, so let them know. Try doing it via the feedback app, please, rather than via angry Twitter posts. But to me, first of all, I don't think this screenshot is actually representative of the actual changes. But even if it was, I still think that a beta is a beta, and it's exactly there to experiment with. Boy saying you're back, and Riley saying it switches on light backgrounds. Yeah, it switches if it's extremely light, and it actually it almost glitches out in that regard, I would argue, where if you start swiping it now, right, it will actually be more glassy for once it's above those elements. It's when it's over like pure white where it kind of panics a little bit, overcorrects. And in my opinion, that very much is poor implementation that's very indicative of a beta, or it's actually a buggy implementation of a tweak. So yeah, again, it's all subject to change still. Even if this was the end result, I don't think it would be bad. I think the buggy nature of it would be bad. But again, we still have 2 full months to go until the official release. I can't wait till the iPhone 17. Well, you're gonna get a lot of coverage about the iPhone 17 series here. And unlike tomorrow's Galaxy Unpacked event, I'll actually be able to live stream the iPhone reveal. And I'll be giving you at least a full week of coverage, similar to how I did WWDC. So if you're watching now and you're joining, you haven't yet liked, subscribed, share, and comment, all of that jazz. If you want to also support us more directly, super chatting, super stickering, channel membership making, Patreon subscription, financing, that's all up to you to make this channel even better and make coverage even more regular and make me even more enthused about all of this. Instead of naming the iPhone 17, you should name it iPhone 26 so it aligns with iOS 26. I'm not sure. I kind of would prefer if numbers went away entirely. Apple could call it iPhone and then in brackets 26, right? Based on the fact that, like saying, oh, it's the iPhone that's gonna be most sold throughout 2026. Again, whether or not you care about this, ultimately, this is still a pretty niche thing. Like, I've seen people really lose track at this point of what iPhone we're at until it comes to the point of them updating their own phone, right? So I've seen people recently update from like an iPhone 12 generation device, not actually sure if it was a Pro or base model, to a 15 Pro. They got like a pretty good deal on some clearance site, and they didn't even know that we're up to 15, right? So yeah, ultimately there's a lot of stuff here that it's that us enthusiasts care about, but regular people don't really, right? To put it mildly, to be honest. So wallpapers, so the new default wallpaper in iOS 26 is getting new visual modes called Halo, Dust, Sky, and Shadow. There are 3 different blue tone options and one version that has shades of purple, which is a very nice description here. They're actually quite pretty, and even more nicely, they give very, very great like dark mode versions of it. And yeah, this one, the darkest, I'm actually, I wasn't quite a fan of this wallpaper, but Apple added a great parallax effect to it with Beta 2, and now they're adding all these new modes on it. In my opinion, now it's actually pretty great. Remember, guys, they skipped the iPhone 9. Sure, they can skip anything. I mean, technically, if they really wanted to, they could jump to the iPhone 20 right away, but I don't think they would, because that would then lead them to be like, oh, there's an iPhone 20, but there's like a Galaxy S26. I don't think they would really like that. While if you have like an iPhone 17, I don't think it makes you think, oh, it's 9 generations behind the latest Galaxy. It just makes you think, oh, it's a very different branding scheme. But then again, if you care about too much about this, you will just screw yourself over. I would argue that the best example for that is the Xbox 360, where Microsoft was afraid that if they named the second generation Xbox the Xbox 2 and it ended up competing versus the PlayStation 3, that would make the Xbox 2 look bad, right? So they ended up calling it something crazy like the Xbox 360, and then people were wondering, well, what does that mean for a sequel? Will we get an Xbox 720? Will we eventually get like an Xbox 1440? Will we get an Xbox 360 Series 2 or something like that, right? And we ended up getting the Xbox One, right? And then after the Xbox One, we actually ended up getting the Xbox Series. But even then, we still had to differentiate between Series S and Series X. So now it's like, would we get like a Series 2 once they switch to like their PC console hybrid? Yeah, they basically screwed themselves over the moment they really thought, oh my God, our numbers need to be competitive, rather than focusing on their devices being actually competitive. Change the company name and iPhone name exactly. Call this Apple and call Apple iPhone. Control center, Apple tweaked the blue and green colors for the Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, AirDrop, and cellular toggles. The colors are brighter and more in line with other colors in Control Center. I would also argue that they are more distinct, and they make the white iconography inside them stand out more. So together with the increased blur, the lessening of the liquid glass effect and everything like that. For one, Control Center readability is now as good as it was on iOS 17, and we are just at beta 3, thankfully. But one thing that I'm not the greatest at colors, unfortunately. I'm very man in that regard. 25 to 30% of men suffer from some point of color issue, seeing issues, and yeah, this makes it easier to see. There are also iPadOS 26 changes, mainly stuff like it supports shake to find. So if, for example, your cursor disappears or you just don't know where exactly it is on your screen, which granted shouldn't be happening too much on at most a 13-inch screen like the iPad. It's mostly meant for like external monitors and things like that. But let's say I didn't know where my mouse cursor was and I still didn't see it after moving it around. Now if I shake it, similar to the Mac, it gets bigger and allows me to find it. Maps gain support for fog advisories when using offline maps, plus a beta 3 flashes out the feature that alerts you to commute delays. The folders interface in Safari features some minor design tweaks. Again, none of that is very important. at least I am very happy that they tweaked like the basically open more tabs button, which they initially placed away from the search bar. So they are listening, and at this point I would argue iOS 18 is already so good that we are kind of gonna be left mostly with small tweaks across the board. And there are fixes. I've seen some people say that they now have much better experience, for example, with iPads connecting to storage. So, for example, a feature of iOS 26 is that when your iPad transfers files from external storage or transfers files to external storage, that's now much better supported in multitasking. So it's way less likely that the process will spontaneously pause or slow down by like 2-3x, or even outright stop and don't do anything, right, or just be canceled. And supposedly they've also featured they've also fixed some stuff with external display support. Again, this is a very specific scenario, so it's actually quite interesting that they're already fixing when iPads are connecting to external displays and going into sleep mode while in active video calls. So seemingly people have already updated their work iPads to this and are experiencing issues. Good for Apple for catching that. Yeah, and there is obviously more to come. It just came out yesterday. One standout thing to me in all the new betas is the new Tahoe Day aerial screensaver. That is absolutely beautiful. You can see it here on my main screen. It's not just a wallpaper, but obviously when you turn on your Mac or it goes into like this hibernation mode, it's actually like a visual thing. Great screensaver. Apple screensavers have been an absolute blast in recent years, and this is 100% one of the best ones. Boy saying you've been half tempted to get budget Android. I know earbuds Galaxy FF can't do nothing like update on iPhone at all. Yeah, I mean, it depends. I fully understand what you mean, right? Like, you are a little bit trapped in getting the most experience you can get, unfortunately, there. But it's still something that, in my opinion, you shouldn't entirely stop yourself from like having a foot into the door of other ecosystems. So if you want to own a Galaxy Watch, or if you want to own Galaxy earbuds, right, you might force yourself, quote unquote, to get like a Galaxy A56 or something like that, or maybe like a last gen device for way less money. Yeah, I can see that. Obviously, it depends on your finances. It depends on how exactly you plan on using it. Obviously, if you want to fully leverage it, like maybe you want to do Nintendo 3DS emulation and even some Nintendo Switch emulation, now you probably wouldn't be looking at a mid-range device, but rather something like a Snapdragon 8 Gen 4 or even an 8 Elite product. So yeah, there's a lot to consider. Also, when it comes to macOS 26 Tahoe, I just wanted to show you more stuff. So things here that device temperatures have come down when using it. I can actually show this even right now. So right now I'm charging my Mac, and yes, it is having the fans on, but we are not reaching like over 80 degrees, even with the fans not quite at 5,000 RPM. And again, I do have an app running in the background, a game running in the background. You'll also catch that in Control Center. Why am I showing you this here if I can just show it to you here? So you will see that the buttons or the control toggles in Control Center, they've been tweaked. Previously, they got noticeably larger. You also see that they're buggy right now. So this one turns into glass. This one doesn't. So again, all of this is beta stuff. All of this will be subject to change. And of course, features like the new app library, like Apple's replacement for Launchpad, that one got a huge tweak on Tahoe. So yeah, plenty of stuff changing. Plenty of stuff getting tweaked, like the Spotlight search animation being super duper smooth and everything like that. So yeah, really happy with how these betas are developing. I'm just used to update my earbuds. Yeah, I mean it's a shame. Like, do you not have any friends with like an Android device that could update your earbuds or something like that? It's a shame that we do not get like proper like Galaxy accessories apps and stuff like that on iPhone, because there's nothing to prevent that in theory. Yeah, that's a bit unfortunate. But that's about it when it comes to the software stuff today. We've been streaming now for almost 1.5 hours. I'll see if I missed anything big. Okay, so that's just dummy looks in for the iPhone 17 Air. No, I don't think. One of 4 new. Oh, we get new Apple Arcade games. What is Friends? Exactly. There are some Safari tab changes. They now visually look good. They don't have that black line underneath. So, yeah. That's about my small summary for iOS 26 Beta 3 and Tahoe Beta 3, but let's actually get to the really big good stuff. Let's actually get to hardware news. And I will actually start with the biggest one, which is we've been rumored. Why do I always start this sentence that way? This is like the fifth time on this channel. We have been getting rumors about an iPhone 17 Pro change from titanium down to aluminum to improve weight, to reduce build costs while other costs increase, like larger batteries, vapor chambers, even more expensive processors, even more expensive cameras, right? So Apple needs to find some way to cut down on cost, I would argue. What's interesting that now we are kind of in the stretch where I am really inclined to believe this. So this is coming from Instant Digital on Weibo. So similar to Digital Tech Station and other Weibo leakers, it's basically three main ones that we cover here. Does have a mixed track record, but still a decent enough one for me to cover. And he basically says that all of this very golden stuff that you see in this render is gonna be aluminum. Now, I'm not sure about the glass here. From everything we hear, basically the bump is gonna be metallic, but then inside there is gonna be glass. Probably to just continue that look that Apple has been establishing. It's also going to give Apple even more opportunities to give the device different textures and differently looking materials. Or they might decide to match this one exactly. But basically, there's going to be a glass cutout for radio frequency transparency, for wireless charging on the back. But the rest is going to be metal, which is going to help with things like cooling. Aluminum itself is also even lighter than the glass that Apple uses on the back. So it's going to help with things like shatter resistance. Like, for example, if your phone drops on the edge, it's now more likely to bend because it's using aluminum rather than titanium. But that impact force, when it transferred, is still going to hit aluminum before it's going to hit the glass. While with the current titanium chassis, if you hit the titanium and the force isn't fully absorbed by the titanium and gets also transferred to the glass, well, now the glass is much more likely to shatter than, of course, a soft metal like aluminum. So again, some upsides, some downsides. I mostly see positives in this. I've always said that material choices to me don't matter nearly as much as the feel and, of course, the features of the end product. So if it helps the device overall, I am all for it. And hey, if it prevents Apple from increasing prices, again, that is us with still not fully knowing the tariff situation. They got delayed again. But yeah, it's going to be interesting what happens. So basically, aluminum frame, glass section on the back to preserve MagSafe and Qi wireless charging. So this actually almost looks Sorry, there was like a weird sound. Maybe it's my tinnitus. So this actually almost looks like an Apple Wallet sized cut, and the Apple logo is actually gonna be centered exactly in there, right? So some people asked, why is the Apple logo moving? Well, if we have too many different levels that look also visually different, then now you unfortunately also have the issue, well, is the Apple logo centered across the entire device? Sure, but now the entire device is dominated by so many different materials. The aluminum chassis that goes here and here and here, the glass that enables wireless charging and MagSafe, the glass around the cameras. So Apple just centered it here. And I think if it's really also dead center in just this rounded rectangle, I think it's gonna look fine. I think your eye is gonna instinctively switch from trying to center it on the overall iPhone and instead center it on this cutout, if you want to call it that way. So, but yeah, this is now like the third major leaker telling us that. And of course, he has leaked other stuff well in the past. So yeah, at this point, I'm now actually inclined to believe that this design is going to happen. Now, it should be noted that the exact design that's going to come from this is probably still somewhat secret, right? Like, what exactly is going to be the transition between the finish here and the finish here? Is Apple going to target a very similar look or a more contrasty look? What's the difference going to be between the glass used here and the glass used there? So those are going to be interesting details down the road. And of course, we keep getting leaks in that vein, which is interesting because you also see a lot of stuff, even stuff that I've used in my thumbnails in the past, not having this glass cutout. Now, this could mean two things. It could mean that it will not be visually seen because it's going to be designed to just match the aluminum color exactly, or it's just older information, right? So this is from Majin Buu. He reiterates basically that the Apple logo is now pushed down below, and that of course the new MagSafe ring design is going to have this little cut that basically meets the Apple logo perfectly in the middle. He's working with a case company, so supposedly he has sources. Sony Dixon has also confirmed those initial rumors, so this also is taking some shape. Plus also Majin Buu in the past has also talked about the iPhone 17 Pro actually using an aluminum chassis. He's also talked about the vapor chamber. So now it seems like also this part, I'm now more likely to believe it because, if his previous rumors end up being correct for the iPhone 17 Pro, well, hopefully that also means that his vapor chamber rumors and leaks end up being correct. Next is the cheapest iPhone in the lineup before we get from the top end to the low end to the actual iPhones, right? So the 17e, and this is a pretty disappointing rumor. Supposedly, it's keeping the exact same display as the 16e. This is a supply chain report, so saying yes, we will get a 17e, which was kind of questionable. Like Min-Chi Kuo, Mark Gurman didn't want to fully commit to whether there's going to be one, even though some of them said that there would be a third generation iPhone E that's going to be the iPhone 18e, which obviously makes you think, there will be then a second generation in between them, in between the 16e and the 18e, and that will be the 17e. Yeah, but this will be a disappointment to me because I had hoped that instead of inheriting the display of the iPhone 14, which is what happens with the 16e, that the 17e would get the display of the iPhone 15, which is of course supporting of the dynamic island and gets over twice as bright, up to 2000 nits rather than 800 nits. Probably Apple thinks that the 16e is selling well enough to to allow that. They also probably think that they don't want to cannibalize sales of the upcoming 17 and 17 Air by making the 17E too good. But at worst, but when it comes to the 18E, I really hope that by the 18E, they give it a dynamic island, a brighter screen, a more vibrant screen. So yeah, this one is pretty disappointing. It was learned today that Apple plans to launch the entry-level organic light-emitting diode iPhone 17e next spring. The panel reuses OLED that's currently used for the iPhone 16e. So that's a bit disappointing, unfortunately. But hey, maybe that will just mean that it drops faster even in price than the 16e. You can already get the 16e on a lot of carriers without any kind of upcharge. So hopefully at that point it means that the 17e keeps the current pricing while still improving the device. But for the 17 and 17 Air, we are actually rumored to get one major change over the previous generations, which is that they are, and this is another Weibo leaker, so instant digital, digital test station, fixed focus digital, all the three guys basically. I think we've covered like a digital chat station in a previous video, now instant digital and fixed focus digital today. Wait, do I not have the rumor actually open? That's actually different than iPhone 17 bezels 16 Pro. So supposedly we are getting the slim bezel. Riley, the problem is if you think that these leaks are now boring, the problem is you now will be perpetually bored to all eternity, except for stuff like foldables, right? Like we are going to get back to you basically becoming Tylosive Tech in my community and basically bitching that every year we are not getting like a grand redesign or something like that, which is absolutely not possible. Now, I agree that specifically about the 17E, it's a bit of a boring, or more precisely, a disappointing rumor. But again, I also don't think that you are the person that cares about the E at all, right? At worst, you care about the base 17 and 17 Air, and then more likely about the Pros, and then eventually the Ultras and foldables, right? Supposedly that the 17 and 17 Air, now this is coming from Digital Chat Station, so we actually got all three in one video. Supposedly we are getting the bezels that are basically on the same level as the 16 Pro, which are obviously some of the thinnest bezels ever, and definitely the thinnest bezels currently on an iPhone. These are the display sizes we are supposed to be getting. So the iPhone 17, contrary to what certain leakers and analysts like Jeff Poo have said in the past, it's going to get a 6.3-inch screen rather than a 6.1-inch screen. The Air is going to get a 6.6-inch screen. Then so it has a slightly smaller screen than the Plus, and it has ultra thin bezels. With the 17, you can basically expect it to have about the same form factor as the 16. It has a slightly larger screen, but it has thinner bezels. With the 17 Air, you can actually expect it to have a much smaller footprint than the Plus, because not only is its screen a tiny bit smaller, but it has even slimmer bezels. Solomon saying, we hit Pick smartphone 5 years ago, we're just cycling back. Yeah, but that's pretty much what you're gonna get across the board for so much stuff. The excitement comes when that cycling of certain design decisions, different materials and everything actually coincides with a better product. Like for example, when in 2021, Apple made a thicker MacBook Pro, right? They also brought back ports that people have been asking for, SD card slots, HDMI, traditional MagSafe, but then they also, inside inside that chassis increased battery capacity, they gave you better cooling, and they combined it with new specs like M1 Pro and M1 Max processors. I mean, that's why I got my MacBook Pro here. And it combined it with a brand new screen, like a mini LED screen. And supposedly the M6 generation will have a 2nm chip and tandem OLED and a redesign, right? So all of that cycling still serves a purpose. Riley, nah, Drew glazes the pixels. I don't associate with those people. You're like that bartender in Star Wars when like R2-D2 and C-3PO come into the bar in Mos Eisley, the cantina, I'm sorry. We don't call it the bar because it's a kid's movie. And he's like, we don't serve their kind here, right? And yeah, that's how you treat like Pixel supporters. We don't serve their kind on MarkTech. Solomon saying, software needs to get better, but Apple isn't hitting that mark. iOS releases used to be fun. I disagree. I think, what would it even mean to be fun at that point then? Like, better software is actually one of the least fun things. Better software is stable software. It's more battery and RAM economic software. Is any of that really fun to any of us who aren't like hardcore enthusiasts? I would wager not. Yeah, so basically digital chassis, the base iPhone 17 model will look more or less the same. So it's the one phone this year not getting a redesign, which might be for the best for the overall lineup, because I would argue with a 6.3-inch screen, ultra thin bezels, finally ProMotion on the base model, and with the 17 Air giving up certain features like stereo speakers, large battery capacities, and a second camera, this will not actually like I would argue a plus model is way more likely to tempt a base 16 buyer just for it being larger, just for it having more battery, right? Than an Air is for the base 17 buyer. Sure, it's nicer looking or whatever, but is it actually like a better product? Is it worth potentially paying $100 or $200 extra on top of it if you're losing a camera? If the screen is now also barely any larger, right? Previously, the difference was between 6.1 and 6.7 inches, so that's 0.6 inches in difference. Now it's between 6.3 and 6.6. Not only is it a nominally smaller number, it's literally half, right? But it's also actually a much smaller percentage increase. And yeah, plus the base model is going to look really interesting now in terms of financial success to me versus the base 17 Pro, because it's not getting a redesign, but I would argue that the base 16 design is still going to be more attractive to a lot of people than the 17 Pro redesign. Now, if it has the same ultra thin bezels and the dynamic island and everything else like that, it's just going to be a very, very attractive product. Solomon, the iPhone 17 Air will be one of the best-selling 17 series. I see people buying this model, especially women. Yeah, I can see that, but the difference here is, of course, what you compare it with, right? I actually see now a little bit more of some of the point that Apple is targeting here, because slightly smaller screen, even thinner bezels will actually now, while it won't make this suddenly a one-handed phone, right? It's still mostly going to be a two-hander, especially for women, especially with people with smaller hands, kids definitely. But it's now going to be much, much more comfortable for those people, right? So I think if Apple wants to say, look, the Air gives you a bit more screen real estate than the base 17, maybe close to the same battery life. You lose one camera, but do you really care? Do you really use much more than the main camera anyway? Right? Also, who knows? Maybe the 17 Air has a better main camera than the base 17. Maybe the base 17 sticks with a 1 by 1.56 inch sensor, and this gets a 1 by 1.28 inch sensor, like similar to the Pros. So it's going to be an interesting discussion in the understand. I still would never consider the Air for myself, just on the lack of stereo speakers. Like, that to me is a crucial feature to have. I still keep some open-mindedness here because, I mean, it could still be stereo even with just one speaker grill. Maybe if it separates the sound in one left and right channel, but it's just, yeah, over the pros especially, it's just gonna suck in so many ways, unfortunately. But speaking of the 17 Air, it's supposedly coming with a new blue color that's going to be different from any before. This is coming also from Fixed Focus Digital. So you can see all those guys from China apparently took the 4th of July weekend off and now are back in full force. But supposedly the main color, which doesn't mean that it won't have other color options, it just means that the color that Apple is going to advertise most is going to be a barely blue, which kind of gives us iPhone 15 flashbacks, right? Where the colors were very subtle. Apparently the finish is very light, and in low light conditions could be easy to confuse with white. That's a lot of the problems that we had with the 15 series. So it's going to be interesting if now this kind of color is a selling point. I mean, we did get sky blue on the recent MacBook Air, and supposedly Apple was thinking of implementing a similar color on the iPhone 17 series. Whether or not that happened specifically, like I believed it was to be for the 17 Pro, maybe this was actually for the 17 Air, I couldn't tell you. Whether or not it's similar to Sierra Blue, which is 100% blue, by the way. It has none of the visibility issues of the 15 series, which, the paler pastel glass and aluminum colors of the iPhone 15. If it is Sierra Blue in the end, I'm very happy, or very similar to that. But what I'm seeing here is way more similar to what we have grown to fear with the iPhone 15 when Apple went with their first generation of color-infused glass. Again, I cannot tell you if it's going to be true or how subtle it's actually going to be, but yeah, that's unfortunately where we're at right now with those rumors. But I would argue that we are actually now getting a pretty comprehensive image of the iPhone 17 generation. So let's actually start backwards by the device that's going to be announced last, which is going to be like next February to April. So we are getting an iPhone 17e, right, as a successor to the 16e, but it's not going to be visually very exciting. Then, wait, did I close? No, this is it. But then we're getting the 17 and 17 Air. And this is actually one last piece of actual rumors and leaks that I wanted to cover, which is that supposedly, and this could mean that Jeff Poo was wrong yet again, which Jeff Poo's track record is now becoming worse and worse with every month. But basically, Jeff Poo said not too long ago that the base iPhone 17 is going to get the A18 chip. So it's just going to be plug and play basically from the iPhone 16 and 8 gigabytes of memory, while the 17 Air is going to get the A19 chip with 12 gigs of memory, and the Pro and Pro Max are going to get the A19 Pro with 12 gigs of memory. So the one thing that we pretty much know by now is that the iPhone 17 Pro and 17 Pro Max are going to get an A19 Pro chip and 12 gigs of memory. That's very, very clear at this point. Now, whether or not the memory speeds change, like potentially from 7,500 mega transfers per second to 8,533, or who knows, maybe something crazy like 10,700 mega transfers. That is a bit unclear. The 17 Air getting a regular non-Pro A19 chip and 12 gigs of RAM is very likely. We are not fully sure about the RAM amount for the base iPhone 17, but according to this new leak, it's now looking likely that at least it's not going to have the A18 last generation chip, but actually a new one. So there's an iOS 18 code leak that reveals all new chips coming to iPhones, Apple TV, and HomePod Mini. Last month, an individual in China uploaded a YouTube video with English subtitles of an alleged iPhone 16 engineering prototype from last year. According to a Mac Rumors tipster, the device is running an internal build of iOS 18, but it's a non-UI version, meaning that you cannot load the home screen or other interfaces. Within the code for this internal iOS 18 build, there are code names and identifiers for many upcoming Apple chips, according to the video and our tipster. Now, it should be noted, of course, some things could change. Like, for example, Apple might have planned to use the A19 chip on the iPhone 17, but maybe they chicken out and decide to use the A18, which would then also be awkward for the 17E. I honestly don't really see that happening. I think that we're going to get pretty much a repeat of what we got this year, which is a base chip for the base iPhone, the Air versus, or the, like it was with the Plus, and for the E, and then the Pro chip for the Pro and the Pro Max. There are other chips in there, like an M5 chip that's supposedly going to come to MacBook Airs, Pros, Minis, iMacs, iPad Pros, and Vision Pros. So at least it seems like iPad Mini, like Mac Mini and iMac are on a somewhat regular update schedule now. It's going to be interesting whether the iPad Pro gets released before the other products on this list here, as has been rumored for a little bit. There's, of course, M5 Pro chips coming to the MacBook Pros, Mac Minis. Interestingly enough, there's no M Max chip here. But then again, consider where this is coming from. This could have come from a stage where Apple was not yet actively testing an M Max. There's also an S11 chip for the Apple Watch Series 11. Now, that could be basically a rebranded S chip. Riley, you're asking no A19 Pro MacBook Air. First of all, that MacBook Air is supposedly coming with an A18 Pro. So that is one thing that actually leads me to believe that it is going to be relatively cheap. If it was using a current generation chip, that could give it some room, in my opinion, to be $800 maybe, right? And you basically just pay $200 more for faster ports and the faster chip with the MacBook Air. But if it's actually also a last gen chip, then it also warrants like a further like $50 to $100 price reduction. And I mean, again, we don't even know how much better the A19 is going to be over the A18. So maybe it's not that much of a reason to worry. For example, with the S series of chips that come into the Apple Watch, we know that sometimes Apple basically just rebrands them. It's a new generation. For example, the Apple Watch Series 10 got the S10 chip. The Ultra 2, of course, did not, because it wasn't upgraded last year. But whether or not that means that the S11 is brand new and maybe based on like new 3 nanometer node, the latest E-core architecture, right? I cannot tell you. But one thing that is pretty encouraging here is that supposedly the SE3, which we are kind of overdue for an upgrade, the SE2 getting a little bit long in the tooth, is getting the same chip as those devices. The C2 modem for the iPhone 17e and probably the entire iPhone 18 lineup. And what's interesting that Proxima is the Wi-Fi chip that Apple is obviously working on for the Apple TV and HomePod Mini. However, we have also heard that supposedly Apple's Wi-Fi 7 chips have been deemed good enough to power the entire iPhone 17 series. So this might be just something that is impossible to tell from the nature of this specific leak, because it might mention Proxima, just not where exactly it's going. So we kind of have to mix and match rumors to create a story around it. Most of those are obvious, one number higher than currently chips, but the all-new Proxima chip is a little more interesting. The chip was first reported on last year by Bloomberg's Mark Gurman, and he said that it would be included in new Apple TV and HomePod Mini models launching later this year. I desperately want new big HomePods. I really hope Apple still makes a HomePod without any screen. I don't need that. I just want a stereo HomePod setup. When I originally bought myself the OG HomePod, I bought it standalone. I didn't bought it in a stereo setup. Then the second generation came out, and it's not actually stereo compatible with the original HomePod. And I'm not gonna go and spend $250 on a second HomePod, on a second first generation HomePod, if the new HomePod just seems right around the corner. So please, Apple, actually launch it. He also expects at least some iPhone 17 models to use the chip, along with future iPad and Mac models. Similar to how Apple ditched Intel for Mac processors. So, by the way, this is already a big hit to Broadcom's business, like losing potentially even a part of the iPhone lineup, but in the future, every Apple device, that's gonna sting hard. I wouldn't be surprised if Broadcom really got like aggressive in like patent disputes, so to maybe slow down Apple's Wi-Fi modem development as much as possible. Similar to Apple ditched Intel for Mac processors and how it started transitioning away from Qualcomm for iPhone modems, what's up with my pronunciation today? I told you I had a long weekend and long day today. The company's planned Wi-Fi and Bluetooth combo chip will allow it to replace a chip that is currently supplied by Broadcom. Apple's chip is expected to support Wi-Fi 6E or 7. It's interesting, Wi-Fi 7 is not technologically that much more advanced than Wi-Fi 6E. The main advancement in both is the support for 6 gigahertz networks. The difference is that Wi-Fi 7 theoretically allows you to use the 6 gigahertz network simultaneously on one device. Obviously, the router is supposed to do that on 6E too, to combine speeds, right? So basically, your phone simultaneously is accessing the 2.4, the 5, and the 6 gigahertz network to achieve even greater speeds. But for example, when Apple launched Wi-Fi 6E on the iPhone 15 Pro, they increased speeds to 2.4 gigabits per second. And then they launched Wi-Fi 7 across the iPhone 16 and 16 Pro, but they kept actually the same maximum speeds on it, right? So whether or not Wi-Fi 7 is actually going to be faster, or Apple is going to focus similar to the C2 and C1 on efficiency and reliability remains to be seen. Obviously, for the current Apple TV, that's an upgrade over Wi-Fi 6. And for the current HomePod Mini and Big HomePod, which are using an older Apple Watch chip, that's Wi-Fi 4 build, that's a huge generational uplift. Our tipster also claimed that Apple has tested a Mac Pro with an M3 Ultra chip, which they really shouldn't launch at this point, because like M3 Ultra is just going to seem older and older and older the more they wait. Even if they give it like 1 terabyte of RAM inside the Mac Pro, I don't think that's going to be worth it. But it's unclear if it will be released at this point. They also uncovered evidence that Apple has no plans to release an M4 Ultra chip. We actually got kind of a confirmation on that from John Turnus when they announced the latest Mac Studio. They said that the M4 Max ends the family of M4 chips. So, yeah, that's definitely something. As the company already strongly implied, I think that's referring to that, right? Second, Apple told several journalists and YouTubers that not every generation of Mac chips will have an Ultra chip, right? And I think that it was also pretty much implied in the reveal video. It's possible that the Mac Pro might not be updated until an M5 Ultra chip is ready. I really hope they can make it work by like late this year to maybe early next year. But if this takes us into second half of 2026, I think people will just lose trust in the Mac Pro form factor, and they will just focus on buying Mac Studios, because the gaps between Mac Pros will become so absurdly large that people will just ask themselves, why would I ever pay a $3,000 premium over a similarly spec'd Mac Studio, right? Especially if I don't even get something like an extreme chip that combines like 4 max dice or something like that. Yeah, I think that would basically be the death knell of the Mac Pro if they wait way too long on giving it the M5 Ultra. But hey, what do I know, right? I mean, it's not like Apple really cares about that, right? I know some people might say, oh, but it maxes out at like 20K or something like that. Apple doesn't care about that. They can sell 20 iPhones for $1,000 way easier than they can sell one Mac Pro that's fully maxed out. So, yeah, it's an interesting situation. There's some good stuff here, like potentially the base iPhone 17 using an A19 chip rather than an 18, which was rumored. Again, details on memory capacities, cooling, battery capacity, all of that is going to be interesting to see, but I think we are getting a pretty comprehensive image at this point of the 17 lineup. Okay, AirPods. Yeah, I actually tried to install AirPods beta software. Mine somehow don't want to. No idea why. Let's check what are they. Let's go Mighty Cat, Everybody Shogi, and Worms Across Worlds. Okay, and none of that is necessarily my cup of tea. So no new rumors here. Let's check out the 17 Air reveal. Again, this is a dummy. We have no idea what the back is going to be. It's interesting that we have not. Nobody seems to be. Incorporating like the glass aluminum hybrid chassis for the Air, even though the Air is basically confirmed to support like MagSafe and wireless charging. So obviously it cannot do that through metal, and it's not going to be a simple glass chassis from what I understand. It might be, but yeah, it's going to be very interesting what the actual end product is going to look like. I mean, it could be just a glass chassis for all we know, but yeah, it's interesting that we get we'll get very distinct looks between the 17, then the Air, right, looking very different from each other, and then the Pros looking very different from that. I think initially a lot of people expected like the Air at least have a lot more visual similarity to the Pros because of the camera bar, but just the difference of the single camera bar versus the triangular arrangement, super tall camera bar, plus dual material finish, repositioned Apple logo. That's just, yeah, it's going to make the 17 Pro going to look way different from the 17 Air. Let's check if there's anything up here that we missed. iOS 26. So, no. Okay. So, guys, we've been streaming for about 2 hours. I am getting pretty tired. I have to relax now a little bit. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you for making this a very lively chat. Thank you for letting me play around with some funny stuff like games and whatever. I'll try to incorporate it even more in future videos as I get more familiar with just the form factor of playing and reacting and managing the stream simultaneously. So let me know how you like that. Let me know what you would like to see potentially change and evolve. And of course, just do all the YouTube jazz. Don't just watch. Please also comment. Don't just comment live, but also comment in the regular comment section. Like the video if you enjoyed it. Share that with anybody who you think might enjoy it too. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet done so. Whenever you catch me live, consider leaving a super chat or a super sticker. And if you want to support me long-term financially, you can do so via channel memberships or Patreon. So the link to Patreon is in the description of this channel. And last shout out for you to join our Discord, which has been very lively, very chatty, as Riley would say, very yappy. And I enjoy that very much. So feel free to join over there. Thank you for all of it. I'll try to give you some impromptu coverage tomorrow. Maybe not in video form, maybe on Discord, maybe a bit on Twitter for the Galaxy Unpacked event. But either way, in other ways, I will just be busy until like Saturday. So thank you so much again for everything. I'll catch you guys next time. Let me know what else you would like to see me cover. Thank you. I'll open the wrong thing. It's showing how tired I am. You're getting Big Mark, and Mark Tech is tuning out.